Welcome everybody to the Deconstructor of Fun podcast. Today, my guest is Pieter Kooyman, founder and CEO of Half Moon Studios. Peter, you're a former chief advertising officer of Miniclip, gigantic, huge Miniclip with so many games, such a big audience. Being a chief advertising officer was probably a lot of fun, a very cushy, nice job. How come you're a founder right now? And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Great question. The Miniclip journey was an incredible one. I joined Miniclip. I was there for 13 years. And I joined in 2008 when the company was doing already millions of dollars in revenue. And I was able to see that through for 13 years and to keep growing the business. To a business that now does hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And it was an incredible journey. In the first 5 years, the journey at Miniclip was about the pivot from being primarily a web-based business to then almost 100% a mobile business, which required a change in people, in processes, in technology, and in product. So it was a huge period of pivot, which was very, very interesting professionally for me. Then the second phase at Miniclip was one where we sold the business to Tencent, an incredible achievement. And that then really almost immediately led into the third phase of, let's call it hyper acquisition. By the time we sold the business to Tencent, we were about 200 people. And by the time, I left, we were 13 studios, 800, 900 people, and still going, right? So after I left, the new CEO, Sat Chowdhury, he took over from Rob Small, the founder, and now the president. Miniclip has now acquired Subway Surfers, the IP, incredible IP. Really excited to see what they're going to do with that. At Miniclip, I was ads monetization. I did marketing. I had accountability for marketing and business intelligence as well. So I had like you said, eventually a cushy C-level job with all the perks and benefits that come with that. But to answer your question, the one thing I haven't been able to do is to do from nothing to something. I joined Miniclip. I joined when it was already up and running and to an extent successful. But I was never able to do that journey myself, and always had the aspiration to do that. Always had the ambition to do that, but because things kept going so well at Miniclip, I never really had the chance.
So you have the experience of 1 to 100, and you want to do the 0 to 1. Like that's the passion for being a founder.
Call me crazy.
Yes, I will. I will. Yes. This is crazy.
You have done it, right? You yourself had the aspiration at some point to do that. You have done that. It's a burning desire. It's something, the founder of Miniclip, Rob Small, he was a huge example to me, my boss for a number of years, and the amount of things that I was able to see him do, the difficult decisions that he had to make. It always just kind of fed the beast, if you like.
No, I get it. I have tremendous respect towards all the founders. So much respect for jumping on the grind, but at the same time, I think it's always crazy. Like I'm like a rabbi. I keep telling, if like somebody wants to convert, I'll tell them, don't do it. Like, this is not the religion you want to jump in. The same thing I do to founders. I'm like, don't do it. It's too hard. It's not going to be fun. It's nothing that you imagine it to be. But then those who say, I know it's going to be a tough path, but I still want to do it despite everything you say. Okay, you're ready for the journey. So your journey has been a fast one. I mean, you're a senior executive. You've seen it all. Your position at Miniclip was such a tremendous one because, as you said, it went from a nice, profitable web company to a gigantic mobile publisher, almost a conglomerate with all kinds of games. And when we're talking about ad revenue, the type of games that Miniclip was doing were high audience, probably a lot of in-app ad revenue, as well as app revenue. So you've seen it all. You've experienced it all. How has it been transitioning to the startup? Like, how big are you now? How long have you been working on it? And I know that the first 5 months you worked on your first product, used a lot of
Yeah.
AI and launched it to the test market inside 5 months. So walk me through the
Yeah.
first steps, the 0-0
Yeah,
flow.
sure. Yeah. So we're now 7 people strong.
Mm-hmm.
We're a fully remote studio. I'm based in London, but we've got people across the board. When we started earlier this year, like all startups, we were a blank sheet of paper. We had no AdMob accounts, we had no analytics, we had no GitHub repository, and there was no Notion pages with wonderful process documents. And so in order to build all of those things, I galvanized the team and I said, listen, we're going to build something in 5 months because that's how we will establish all of those things. That is how we will oil the wheels of this organization. And so what we did is we chose a relatively simple mechanic, because you can do something really complex, but the more complex, the longer it takes. So we chose the word scramble mechanic, and we looked at picture quiz games in the space, and we looked at what type of content they had. And then we were very conscious about reimagining that picture quiz content. And so we not only built the game, we needed to build 2,000 rounds, let's call it 20 days of gameplay. And we did that by utilizing lots of generative AI tools and a huge amount of automation. So the first game was developed, but the system that we built was production line, if you like. Overnight, our system creates a new batch of picture quizzes. So we give it clear instructions as to what it is that we want to be producing around the idea or a topic. And then we have Picture Tinder that we use. Going to make it fun.
Mm-hmm.
Where we review all of the pictures that come through. So we swipe right, or which way? This way, right?
Yeah.
We swipe left in order to see which images work for the rounds that we have in mind and which ones do not. So that's how, in a 5-month period, we were able to build a fully fledged app with 2,000 rounds. But the objective was not to make a successful game. Right? The objective was to oil the wheels of the organization. The FTUE is for the monetization of attention are not industry norms. Mishka, it doesn't even have a back button to the main menu, right? So, it's not the product that is going to blow us away as an organization, but it's the start that the company needs, that I think a company needs in order to get going.
How did you get to this approach of we need to ship first, we need to get the reps in? Like, that is a very seasoned, smart approach, and not the other sort of, let's make it perfect, let's come out of the gates, with all the bells and whistles. It was a very, very mature approach. So how did you approach this?
Thank you. So I did an investment round for the business in Jan and Feb, and I picked my investors very carefully, not just for the money, but also for the advice that they did. And I went around in January to all my founder friends, and I went to all of my investors, and I said, okay, so tell me, in my first 6 months, what are the things I should be doing? And what are the things that I shouldn't?
Yeah.
I've ignored some brilliant advice. I've ignored it, but some advice I did take, and that was it. People said, Pete, just get going, launch and learn, make mistakes, build the organization, build capabilities, and take it from there.
And you've raised about 400K in sort of angel round. Let's call it an angel round. It's not even an official pre-seed. And in this angel round, do you have any VCs? Do you only have like former founders?
It's industry friends and family.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. So I'm not going to name any names.
No, of course not.
They're pretty cool.
Yeah. So, and what I'm basically leading is you have people who you truly trust.
Yes.
Who can give you the right attention because they know you as a person and they want to help you. And that also built a little bit of a different dynamic. And it's also because you took money from I'm sure they're not pinched for cash, but nevertheless, you borrowed a $5 from a friend and you kind of feel obliged to, perform now that it's different than just a VC who has other people's money and then just throw it around into companies that they've invested. Is that like the way you're thinking as well?
It is. I did go down the VC route earlier this
Hmm.
year. I had lots of conversations with lots of people. Um, AI is pretty hot now. AI was even hotter back then, right?
Hmm.
This is just off the back of GPT and Midjourney and 11 Labs and these hundreds of millions of dollar rounds. Um, Ultimately, at the time, I made the decision to continue to be scrappy, right?
Hmm.
Um, the the kind of approach that I want to take in the business about marketing is not one where we will continue with the tried and tested mobile marketing IDFA, um, sharpshooter approach. It's just not going to work.
No.
So, as an organizational behavior, we have to do things differently. And one of the kind of other philosophies of the business is that we tell ourselves that what we are continually trying to do is to reimagine marketing. Like, let's not go to those tried and tested methods. Let's see what else we might be able to do with generative AI in order to do things very, very differently using
Hmm.
the content we've developed. Um, but I get sidetracked. I did have an opportunity to take money from VCs back then, but I think the behavior, the scrappy behavior, the growth hacking behavior, the pressure
Hmm.
of dealing with a finite amount of time, I think those are really great behaviors for an organization to get into at an early stage of its existence.
I agree. I agree. It's you didn't make your life easy, and that's a good thing, especially in the beginning. So you have 7 people. Like, how is the like what is the organization like? Like, what kind of people do you have, and what kind of a hats are you wearing right now?
Yeah, it's we're we've done, I think, a really fantastic job of putting together an absolutely fantastic small
Hmm.
team that can operate like a big
Yeah.
team, right? That's the whole idea. The kind of the the three pillars of the organization. We're reimagining the quiz, we're reimagining marketing, but we're also reimagining the organization, right? So I'm really trying to be super purposeful about um, we now live in a post-COVID world.
Hmm.
We live in a post-generative AI world. We live in a post-IDFA world.
Yeah.
What kind of organization, now that you know all these things, now that I know all these things, what should that organization be like? Um, and so when you look at the team, there's kind of four major things that from a reimagining the organization that is happening throughout the org, right? So the first one is the concept of multiple hats. I've only hired people that can do at least two jobs. So my data analyst
Hmm.
is also an experienced data engineer. My game developer has also dabbled extensively in game design. My head of growth, he also does his own video editing. And I discovered recently that he's not a bad front-end Unity developer as well. So multiple hats for me is a really conscious decision for the organization. I believe that in a small organization like this, with tools like generative AI, um, you can amplify people's jobs in a huge way. And I think for small organizations, the area of the specialist, the era, apologies, of the specialist is over. So I think generalists is really where it's at. Or, like I said, augmented by these tools that we've now got available to us.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, once you start hiring specialists, then specialists want to hire other specialists because that is the way they've worked before. So I can do this and I need that and I need this. And this is how the organization should function. These are the processes, these are the production, so forth and so forth. And I actually posted something about this on LinkedIn. There was an executive, a very, very high level, like people don't know, and I won't tell which executive I'm referring to, but that person said to a founder, that you should never hire AAA talent in your company. And the founder had a very small company, and that was a very divisive um, opinion to give from this very high level mobile executive from a very, very, very good company. a very
Mm.
creative company as well. And people were, of course, on the face of it, very against it. But I think he was talking about these issues is like, once you start hiring specialists, your organization will blow up in size, in costs, and the speed will be reduced, the quality will be increased, but you're not able to pay for the quality at this stage, and you have to focus on
Mhm.
the medium that you're making your game to. And then that founder was working, I'm not going to reveal on whether it's mobile or some other double A type of a format, but wasn't working on triple A games. So hiring triple A talent was something that was told to avoid. Um, regarding the point that you made, so multi hats and generative AI, is this thesis or almost like a core value of your company? How do you share this inside the company, and how do you use it with growing it? Like, do you sit down and say, "Hey, this is AI. I need you to do multiple things, but you will have
Sure.
AI at support. This is how we work. At this point, we're not gonna work in any other way." Like, how do you um, disseminate this rule or this thesis?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question, because you can have all the values and philosophies you like, but if you don't talk about them,
Hmm.
um, it, it has to start day one. So when I started speaking to talent for the organization, some of which I'd identified previously, people that I've worked with in the past, the data analyst
Hmm.
is an example, the data engineer is an example. You've got to start day one, right, to set this expectation. Because also the data engineer that I was talking about, he's now actually learning front end development in Unity, and he's learning development in React, right? So he really embraced the option. He really embraced the opportunity um, of kind of being able to wear multiple hats, because for him it allowed him to learn and continue to learn a huge amount and not do any of the boring stuff.
Hmm.
Because that's also something that a lot of specialists keep doing, right? And like you said, specialists hire specialists because they then they can hand over the boring stuff that they don't want to do
Right.
to the specialists that work for
Yeah, yeah. I've had the same thing. Like, I've had the privilege of working with all kinds of talent. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. They're different, and they're needed for different types of games. But it was always interesting to work with talent coming in from AAA, where they would mention, "Hey, we need, I don't know, graphic performance engineer." You're like, I've worked in mobile games for 12 years. I've never seen one. Like, I maybe have seen one. Like, maybe they work in central function at a large corporation and they've done something. I've never had one on my team. Like, what is this? What does this person do? How have I
Yeah.
gotten till this point without ever meeting this crucial talent that is absolutely necessary to hire?
Yeah.
So, and again, I don't mean that this is a bad thing, but this is like the mindset and the expectations are so different. And if that is not a clear sort of a communication of how this company functions, then you'll end up in a situation where the people are kind of pulling the company towards different direction that your original thought. So, no,
Can I
go ahead. Of course.
can I jump? Because I think it's just really interesting because so many of these things um, I'm starting with, right?
No.
You call it a value for the business. Um, I think I'm right. I thought, otherwise, otherwise I wouldn't be kind of pushing this agenda forward. But I'm just interested from your perspective because you started Savage
Hmm.
in 2019,
Yeah.
2020,
Yeah.
right? Pre-COVID, pre-Gen AI. You could still use IDFA at that stage.
Hmm.
Um, the things I talk about, right? So the multiple hats
Yeah.
concept, leveraging generative AI as much as possible, automating like crazy is something that we do. I think a small team is absolutely critical because the communication is clear. It's a flat structure. Everyone knows exactly what's going on. There's no Chinese whispers. The things that I talk about, does it resonate with you? And if you were to start Savage now, which clearly you don't, perhaps want to do,
No.
how would it be different?
Yeah, so that's a very good point. I think it's what I'm kind of like talking about and raising these things is like, how do we disseminate this sort of information? Because uh, with my starting, I was so eager to start, where I did all the mistakes of a first time founder, and that is like moving too fast ahead before aligning with the people who you've chosen to start this with. And that ended up like that led to negative scenarios where we had to part ways with a couple of the co-founders during the first 2 years. Um, And it's very unfortunate. And I would blame myself for that, for not being strong enough in clearly communicating what type of a products are we making? How are we making these products? And it was more of because I started the company with many people who I hadn't worked with before due to various reasons. Again, these are all led to my investment theses on that have changed dramatically since this. But that led to sort of a projecting the experiences and kind of like thinking that what I know and understand and believe to be true is probably what everybody else believes is true. And when I would say it, I was like, this is the truth, right? And they're like, no, 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 no. This is not how I see things. This is not how I see the market. This is not how I see these type of games. And if these things uh, come like surface after you've started the company, that's a bad thing because now you have to work on the alignment of the core, and alignment takes time. It takes a lot of effort. It's very frustrating, and you're not hitting the ground running. So that's why I'm kind of like, very very adamant on who are you working with, who are your business partners, have you aligned with
Mm,
before? Usually, those teams that have worked before together tend to share the same experiences. They've aligned, they speak the same language. If you say something, they won't
mhm,
be like, Peter's out of his mind. It's like, no, no, they trust you, they know you, they know your experience and you know them. So that when they suggest certain things that should be done, you're like, yep, I trust you. I understand where you're coming from. But if you wouldn't, if they would be coming in from a different spectrum and having different view on what good looks like, you would have a lot of challenges. And that those challenges, that misalignment would be then rippled through the rest of the organization. And that's the biggest hurdle that startups tend to have.
yeah, totally. The greatest myth about
Yeah.
communication is that it actually took place, right?
Yeah.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think you're doing it in a very right way, and you have clearly great advisors who are pushing you in the right direction, and making sure that you actually focus on shipping and making the product versus anything else that comes after. Because I
Mm,
think the first stages from start of the company to angel or pre-seed rounds to seed rounds to up to Series A should be all about the product. And I know that there will come in people whose opinions I very much respect, who would say, hey, you have to slow down. You have to write your values. You have to write your mission. You have to do this. You have to do that. All these underlying things will help you to scale. Very much true post Series A. Let's get the product. Let's show the traction. Let's get on the runway. Let's pick up the speed on the runway. Maybe the tires are coming off the runway already a little bit, and now let's read the manual on how to fly this thing or write the manual of how to write this thing. Like most important is the start and the destination and making sure that who you have on your bus or on your plane um, are travelers. And even if some of them are detractors, it doesn't matter because you're on the wheel. But as it moves
mhm.
forward, then the alignment is super important, especially the alignment of investors, because the more investors you have, the more power the investors have, the more hands on the wheel there will be. And if the hands are pulling to different directions, the plane is going to crash.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, again, the kind of identity, the behavior, the approach of the investors. I think, if I think about the big decisions that I need to make for the business
Mhm.
going forward, one of them is, who do I align myself
Yeah.
with? What is the right type of investor? What is the kind of relationship that I'm looking for with them? Um, and at the moment, I am in active conversations
Yeah.
with a lot of them. And one of the best bits of advice that I got from my advisors was, uh, Pete, this is as much you doing DD on them
Hmm.
as it is them doing DD on you. And it's led to some very interesting scenarios where, the investor and I, we both went into the meeting. I'm like, I'm ready to do DD on you. And they were ready to do DD on me. And it was an interesting dynamic. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way. But I'm hugely grateful for that advice from one of my investors.
Yes, I think so. If you have a chance, do listen to the podcast that I did with Joe Cheppy about growing an organization. So he has gone from, starting his company to Series B already, and 2 rounds during and post COVID at 20 plus mil. So, raising money in this environment, him and his co-founder are able to do that. But what he tells
That's
you
huge.
about investors is like they've gotten a lot of no's because they're building um, a platform or a SaaS service, like how you wanna, call it Solston. His
Mm.
rule, for example, which they abide with, is they only take an investor on who they can have dinner with.
As in that they would enjoy a
Yeah,
dinner with,
yeah,
or
yes,
okay.
yeah. Because as it moves forward, the role of the board becomes so important, especially post B. Everybody has to be aligned. Everybody has to be working together effectively, and so there has to be the social capital that has to be built along with performance capital. So, um, having good relationships is very important, but in your current stage in the beginning, I would say it's not that important because the influence of the investor is very limited because of the share that they have. And going forward, even the investors that you will get in the beginning oftentimes are not the strong, like are not the ones that you're going to have in the later rounds. You know,
Mhm.
they will play through the pre-seed or seed, maybe to series A. And after that, their contributions kind of ended and the bigger boys will come in or girls or however you want to put it. The bigger funds will come in and they have a totally different ways of working, while some funds are only focused on that first 0 to 1. So, definitely work with people who you like working with, and whether it's the dinner rule or the coffee rule for the pre-seed. I was fortunate enough to have both of the investors in our company, Makers Fund and Play Ventures. I knew them on a personal level for years before starting my company, and even Play Venture guys I knew before they started Play Ventures. So this type of trust is very important. So I wouldn't know what to tell you how it is to work with an investor who you don't know. So that's not me.
Mhm.
I only had investors who I knew. So
That makes, I think that's great advice. Thank you.
yeah, kind of like your angel round. So for me, it was that was the same information. But so talking about AI specifically, I think most of the people are definitely interested about that. There's tremendous opportunity for a small organization. As I said, everybody's wearing multiple hats. It kind of enhances your work. It enhances my work. First questions that I sent you on this podcast were generated by AI. So,
Yes.
so I use it. But let's talk about a little bit about existing studios and C-suits, for example. Like you've been at the C-suite of C-suits. Miniclip is as big as it can get, to be honest. Like under especially Tencent, you have endless cash. You can buy anybody. Your audience is insane. It's, operated out of Switzerland, if I'm correct. It's right smack middle of Europe, just ruling everybody with the, but how should a C-suite treat AI, and especially how they should impact the culture of the organization? I think it's safe to
Mhm.
say that everybody in the C-suite is very positive about AI because people are forward looking and they see tremendous upside in it. But the downside of the AI that especially affects the people in the trenches, it's not something that the executives maybe think too much about. So what would be your advice to established companies adopting AI?
It's such an interesting topic. It's such a hard question because so many of the behaviors in these organizations, so much of the culture has created so much inertia that over time, these behaviors trump, a mid-level employee or even a C-level employee that would say, oh my God, we could use this tool to do X. And, however much a mid-level or senior level person in the organization would come and say, what if we go and do that? Let's go in that direction. There will be so many processes, so much inertia, like I said, so much organizational kind of stickiness and glue that would stop from that innovation from actually occurring, right? Whereas for Half Moon Studios, everything is innovation, right? We have everything to play for and everything to risk and everything that we can test. We've got no history
Mm,
whatsoever. So I think the first thing is that if you are an exec team at this point in time, and there is discourse between the different, parts of the C-level organization in particular about the opportunity and risk of using generative AI tools, the first thing you need to do is to get absolute clarity and a single line in terms of what the company's position is towards using generative AI tools. And in a healthy way, think about the risks. Think about the data risk you as an organization face when your employees are using GPT or Midjourney or 11 Labs, where those models then use that data to retrain further models. To really, as a C-level suite, think really carefully about the ethical side of this, right? So to be super aware of the issues to do with bias in many of these text and image models that the teams will be using. Did you just quick side step? Did you see the BuzzFeed article about Barbie?
No,
So
I tend to avoid BuzzFeed.
Probably right, and I think this one was still written by a human actually. So what BuzzFeed did as part of the Barbie launch, they did all countries in the world on Midjourney as Barbies. And of course, being BuzzFeed, they did it and they found some controversial ones that they absolutely left in. And so the bias came in that the country of South Sudan, the Barbie in question had an AK-47 in her arm.
Sounds fun.
Right. It is funny, but where does that come from? That comes from the bias within the solution that has been trained that uses images related to South Sudan that then says that this is, what South Sudan is about. So
wouldn't know what sound like.
Exactly. So it's the, but there is a level of bias in these models that you need to be aware of.
There's also a level of bias. There's a level of bias how we interpret them. Like there's, let's put it this way. So the AI doesn't have ethics. It just does what the programs, what the data it has. We do.
Yeah.
And then we call, this is wrong.
Yes.
And the model's like, I don't know what's wrong or right. I just use the data that I have. Right.
And the same goes for the prompts, right? Yeah. So you as a prompter, you've got a certain level of bias that goes into there in terms of the questions that you ask. But I think as a C-suite, you need to be super aware of all of that. You need to be cognizant about those risks. You need to communicate and train the teams and ensure that there's a training program about the risks of those tools.
When you call about risks, like what do you mean by risks? There's a copyright risk. I don't know if that exists in with AI, but this risk of are you talking about a risk when you do these images, let's say images or text, and something comes out as controversial, which everything is in today's world controversial? Is that the risk you're talking about?
I'm talking about the risk of, let me give you an example. A marketing team uses ChatGPT to build a certain marketing campaign and lets it go too much. And the content that is produced by GPT is not aligned with the company values on topic X or Y, right? So that is a risk that the company needs to be aware of and ensure that staff are aware of that these potential risks exist in the organization.
Got it.
When they use these tools, right? But so those are the risks. The upsides, though, I think are absolutely enormous. But you alluded to it earlier. There are a lot of specialist positions that we've got in these organizations right now, and we can name them or we can not name them, Misha. But there are lots of positions right now that in 2 years' time will not necessarily be required. That in 5 years' time will not necessarily be required. And that's not just for the games industry. It's also for the legal industry. It's for the marketing industry. It's for many industries where things could just be done faster in an automated fashion by these tools. And so the intrinsic behavior of organizations is to cut costs. So if you are going to be a C-level that thinks about those opportunities, you've got to think 2 to 5 years in
Mm.
advance, and you've got to make your people plans accordingly. And most importantly, you've got to start communicating those plans to people as they roll out.
Yeah.
If I were advising a C-suite, that's the kind of spiel that I would give them to really think about it in a very purposeful way.
Yes, because any organization or a country, the goal is to produce more with less input, more output with less input. That is this at the simplicity of any business or any, country or what you name it. And so what we've had in the games industry for a while now is the costs have been going up no matter what platform you're using. AAA is, of course, at the forefront with everything, with initial investments going to just 100 million just to make the game and then another 100 to market it. And the sort of a conversation that I'm hearing about AI currently with C-suits of these big corporations is like, they're alluding that this can make things more efficient. So there wouldn't be any redundancies, perhaps, but we would keep the same. So we wouldn't have to increase the cost, but we would keep growing. And I feel that this is a bit facetious in a way that is being communicated, because I understand what this communication strategy entails. It's like, you don't want to ruffle the feathers of the people, or, call spade a spade. You want to say, hey, we want to do AI because we need to be more efficient, but this doesn't mean that you could lose your job. It just means that maybe we need to hire less, which already is very dangerous, because that means you're not hiring juniors. So even stuff like that pipeline suddenly dies. So I don't know how you're going to get into the games if you're a junior artist or junior narrative designer or so forth. But I think that even that is not true, that there will be more and more tools that single or, small teams can produce content that previously needed 3, 4, 5 times the amount of people. But now they have AI tools to support them, whether they are generic AI tools or whether they are customized for that company, which I think a lot of solutions will be heading to. Is that kind of like the way you're seeing things?
I think you used the word facetious.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's a really interesting observation. I think it's definitely posturing. And it also smells like that organization, as a C-level, did not have a proper conversation about the seismic shift that is happening.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to look at from the other perspectives, though, right? So let's not go C-level, let's go individual contributor. What if you are right now a junior artist? What if you are a junior copywriter in the marketing department in Mobile Studio or AAA Studio X, right? In their shoes, there may be people that are really comfortable doing just that and really scared of what's coming next. And so their natural disposition would be anger. Oh my God, like, I'm an artist. I would spend 2 weeks making this, and now I see this being built in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, how is that possible? So anger, and then anger could turn into actually sticking your head in the sand, which is probably the worst thing that you can do as an individual contributor. You've just got to be aware that the world around you is massively changing.
Yeah.
So get your head out of the sand, realize, as what we were talking about earlier, that generalism will trump specialism. So if you are a junior developer, think about what other skills you can learn right now. See if you can do a 6-month placement in another team. See if you can work shadow other people. See if you can learn that second and third skill set that you can pick up still now, whilst these companies are slowly changing, are catching up to the capabilities of these tools.
Yeah. I'm definitely empathetic for both sides. Like, I understand why the C-suite and the leadership of these companies is trying to communicate in the ways, because if you start being very realistic and talking about realistic scenarios that could happen, the whole organization is going to revolt. And that is also the anger side that you mentioned is that I've seen this happening in various studios, where whether we're talking about art directors or designers, in some cases programmers as well, they adopt this anti-AI stance. I think that's part of also the strike that is going on in Hollywood as well. It's like, and I think, I don't know. Like, I'm very empathetic in why they adopt this. It's very easy to be angry, and it's very natural for us as humans to fight back. Just say no is a no. We're not going to go there. But also, it's fruitless. It's like it's inevitable. These same people might be using AI in their personal life, and they would not want to use it in their professional life because of the effect that it has on their colleagues or even on their own job. So I'm very understanding of that, and I think your advice is correct. I would also kind of advise the same way, like I'm doing this. I'm getting to know AI to understand how can we leverage it more. How can I produce more content? How can I, ease up my work, whether it's doing these questions or doing the summaries of it. I have some people from Google helping me out with an AI stuff who are working on AI and all that stuff. Like you have to be curious and see this more as an enabler to you as an individual to do way more rather than an enemy that is going to steal your job and the job of your colleagues. Because like, having just the positive, it's possible. It's very possible, whether you are in art, whether you're in design, this could be a huge enabler to you where you are able to do the work of an entire small team.
Um, it's an amplifier.
Yes.
It's something, right? And everything that we're trying to do at Half Moon Studios is how can we, with a 10-person team, do what 5 years ago a 50-person
Yes.
studio would have done? And because that is now possible. So it's easier for new, fresh, small companies to make the most of that. It is a very big challenge for larger companies with inertia
No.
to make that change. But nevertheless, if they don't, they're really missing a huge opportunity for the whole organization. And it's not just, it's not just replacing jobs. It's taking away a lot of really boring jobs.
Yeah.
A lot of there was, there's one specific artist, Miniclip, who is a specific artist who for 8 years in a row was the person who drew the cues in 8-ball pool. That was their role. And perhaps they loved that. And perhaps that was, and that's their specialism. With them, I would wonder, hey, is that still going to be a job in 5 years'
Yeah.
time? The answer is probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. I would assume the same with especially AAA studios that have multi-hundred people teams with very specialized people drawing, probably cubes and other stuff. If you're working on GTA, for example, there's, you have to build those cities, but assuming, there's AI help. And the same approach, actually, it's very interesting to see how people who are very much against AI, due to understandable reasons, are very much excited to watch the latest Unreal demo of the new engine and how all the stuff that the engine will now do for you. Like, excuse me. Like the engine teams that are probably like, could be like, I'm losing my jobs, or there's a multiplier components to it. There's a world building component to it. Like all these things, there's analytics components. There's all these things Unity and Unreal, for example, have that previously only studios were able to build internally. So in a way, this is another tool that will enable smaller teams to build bigger products. And I think, even large teams can build infinite products with the help of an AI. So there's upsides, but it's a difficult topic just because of the ethical elements, the risks, the misalignment, and the human impact that these tools will have on studio structures. So it's kind of understandable.
It's huge.
What are sort of like challenges in working with AI tools you've experienced personally now?
Yeah, lots.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you go really deep on these tools and you start learning how the various components collaborate well. Russ, you've got one Gen AI system, another Gen AI system, and another, and you try and mesh them together. I remember really early on. So we're working on a quiz. So one of the early products that we built was a trivia quiz creator, right? So one of our first alpha products that we built was any topic, choose any topic. And we built using GPT and using stability. You've got a random set of 10 questions about that topic at a specific difficulty level that increases over time, where each question has 4 answers one of which must be right. So we built this, we ran it, developed, 1,000 questions, and then we started marking its homework. Um, the the one that stands out for me most is that at the time GPT suggested that Cristiano Ronaldo was Argentina's most famous footballer.
True.
True.
Or Saudi Arabian.
So, so we then did more marking, and
Mhm.
actually we got to like only 70% of the questions we could actually do
Mm.
at a first bat. So then we said, okay, hey, listen, okay, not very good. Let's add in a second component. So then we ran it again, and we ran it to create a truthfulness score. So for GPT to check its own homework, it's, a thing that can be easily done. And still, like, everything fell through. So then we had to find other ways, gathering the same information from things like Wikipedia and Google to check the truthfulness score. And at this stage, I was like, this is really not moving in the right direction. So that was very much one of the early moments where I realized, okay, for now, we don't have to worry hugely about the future of humanity. Um, Maybe at some point
Yeah.
in the future, but at this stage, these tools really need a lot of attention. They need a lot of love. They need a lot of tinkering. And even then, you've got to know and acknowledge that, as much as 10% is actually incorrect.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed the same thing with writing. Like I use AI to, I don't have a cold start problems because I've been writing for such a long time and doing content, but it does help when it kind of spews the first thing, and whether it's right or wrong, it gets your brain firing. Like, no, 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 no. Or like, okay, I can see where this is going and taking it over from there. And it's also really
Mm.
good with suggesting different titles after you've written. So I use AI to almost like bounce, bounce ideas with,
Yeah.
and it's quite helpful.
And beyond GPT, which is
Yeah.
almost ubiquitous, and what is your favorite tool that you've been getting to know intimately?
So I wouldn't say I'm getting to know tools intimately. I use GPT. That is the only one that I use. But then I have people around me who are always willing to help, who work at different corporations. Google is naturally a close one to to me, and I don't know what they do, but I give them sometimes transcripts, and I get back stuff, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing!" And they're like, "Yep, this is from AI." And so I don't
Mhm.
know the process. I just know that on the Slack channel, Deconstructive Fun Slack channel, there's a person who works on AI. He's like, "I'm deep in this. Just send me stuff, and I'll give it to AI, and we'll run through it, and we'll see what comes out." So I probably use Bard, but in a medium. But he promised to teach me the stuff when I'm ready for it. But currently below white belt, just started, just using Chat
Okay.
GPT to bounce off ideas, and then getting help from others who are using. I'm not using Midjourney. I'm not using a lot of visual stuff. I would use, like, we've used it at my studio previously, just to generate ideas. But even with that, like, I mean, I think the stuff that we got out was really cool from the journey, and it was like, pretty amazing. I was like, "Who did this?" It's like, "Oh, AI did
Mhm.
this," and
Mhm.
and then it still kind of goes into that traditional form of like, "All right, these are cool ideas. Take a step all the way back to the beginning and do our own versions of it."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh, why?" I get
Well,
it. I'm very like product thinker, kind of like, let's just move on. Like, this is great. Let's what else do you want to see? Like, why do we have to redo something that is clearly already amazing? But if you're a specialist and a professional, you're only seeing mistakes, and this is AI. This is only an idea. I want to go back to the so I get the other side as well.
and in that example, was it a people-driven motivation or was it a risk-driven motivation?
It wasn't. It was people driven, definitely. It was people. It wasn't because we're talking about ideas and so forth. So, the more product oriented people would be happy to use Chat GPT to come up with different narrative ideas, or to kind of get some mood shots and so forth. And then
Yeah.
the more specialists with the strong backgrounds of, developing games, AAA, AA,
Yeah.
would be like, great. Let's just follow the standard operating procedure.
Understood.
Yeah,
Inertia.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
How we've always done it.
yeah, and then that's why I'm also imagining that it will be quite difficult to transform organizations and their thinking, especially large ones with a lot of specialists. But on the other hand, there are a lot of startups that are started by people who have worked in top of the food chain AAA studios. I forgot the name, but some of them that are, for example, generating open worlds, etc., NPCs, and so forth. These people are coming from AAA studios, and they're actually seizing the moment. They're grabbing AI and they're building their companies around it to support the workflow that they're very intimate about and that they know how difficult, how long it takes, how expensive it is. That's a startup idea. We could do the same thing that you're doing at a cheaper cost. We know exactly your problems. Let me build a product to help you. So there are these companies, and I think we'll see more of them. And I'm quite excited about these companies being spun out, especially as they're spun out from existing top studios, because then they have that sort of a reputation where, oh, this person who used to run our environment art department has now developed a company that allows us to do environment at a large, an easier pace. Let's give him a go. He's from here. He's not a bad person.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm absolutely not a specialist in
Mhm.
that area at all. Right. My background is in
Yeah,
casual games,
yeah,
but those types of solutions I'm really intrigued by, but I would always imagine that actually the AAA studios wouldn't buy that in. They would always want to build that themselves. They would see that as such a core capability, core
yeah,
differentiator, that they wouldn't want to buy that. I know nothing about it,
yeah,
but isn't that a risk where you then build something which actually only your old
yeah.
studio would
I have
want to
have
acquire?
very limited experience with AAA
Yeah.
studios, but to my limited experience, having had conversations with the leadership of these studios, they're very smart people, very business driven. They've done this for a long, long, long time, and I don't, you know, I didn't never sense the sort of um, limitations that they would put on themselves based on their experience and beliefs. They
Okay.
were always very open to new things and new technologies. I would say this is more on the staff level, where these sort of uh, dances come from. But the leadership is as good as it can get, in my opinion.
Okay. Amazing.
No. So what would be sort of like if you could share some key lessons to other studios dabbling in AI? And we're not talking about studios that have an anti-AI stance or who have this sort of a challenge of how do we get people on board with even giving an AI a go. But for studios who are bought in, they want to use AI, probably startups. What are the sort of lessons that you would share, kind of pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah. A few come to mind. The first one is don't underestimate how deep you should go in order to become a master of one of these tools, right? It's going to sound ridiculous when I say this, but to become good at mid-journey is an art. You really need to go very deep on all of the variables and experiment so much to understand, okay, if I use this variable, then this will happen.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly if you are producing at scale and batch work in the way that we are doing. So I haven't used it myself, but let's take something like scenario.gg, right? So, or I think they're now scenario.com. They've rebranded after the fundraise. Um, Game assets is what they make. So you can train your own model. You've got some example
Mm-hmm.
assets, and then you make an infinite. You say, "I want a chicken." It makes a chicken in your style. That's the concept. Sounds amazing. But actually, these tools are new and they're rough around the edges, and it's difficult to kind of get going properly with them for someone who's like, "Oh yeah, do you know what? Let me check this out." And you shouldn't expect like it's going to all work in one go. So with that, what should you do? Be all over their Discord channel. Be all over the tips and tricks. Check in every day. See what mistakes other people are making. Yeah. So these tools are not always very easy if you really want to make the most of them.
Go,
Got
go deep, be a part of a community. Those are very
totally,
important parts.
totally.
Eh,
Now, number two is generative AI is one thing. Automation has to go hand in hand with it. If you really want to scale output, if you really want to scale productivity, you've got to become an expert, or hire in our case, an expert at automation. Generative AI, whether it's text or whether it's images, they produce a lot of stuff, but it's not always exactly what it is that you were looking for. So you need to be able to produce a lot of it, right? There is, Michigan, there's infinite content
yeah.
now, right? So produce infinite content and then figure out what are the bits that you would need for your product or your process or your marketing campaign. And I think lastly, taking the example of BuzzFeed that I mentioned earlier, taking the example of Cristiano Ronaldo that I mentioned earlier, go into this with a healthy level of suspicion. Know that these tools are really brilliant at predicting the next pixel and really brilliant at predicting the next word in a sentence. And at this point, they are definitely more than that, but at their core, these models are exactly that. So, do the sniff test on your
Yeah.
content. Um, and whether it's an article that you write, Mishka, or whether it's a marketing campaign for an email that you send out as a mobile studio, be suspicious at this stage for sure.
Got it. Oh, those are great 3 points. So go deep, automate, and be suspicious.
That's it.
To kind of like, you know, close this conversation, I would like to have like a very broad, like ask you a very broad question, which is like, what do you think is going to be the impact on gaming industry in next 5 years? Relatively short amount of time. Always impossible to predict gaming industry. But if we try 5 years, what would you think?
Yeah. From a people perspective, let's talk about it from a people perspective. What we talked about earlier, i.e., a lot of larger organizations not making conscious Gen AI decisions about people, is something that's going to happen. So there's going to be, you talk about it, you said facetious, I said posturing.
Mhm.
That will result in acrimony, anger. That will result in a lot of individual situations that could probably have been handled very differently if people were very actively looking at things now. From a technology perspective, if you use Midjourney at the moment, Midjourney is static images. And there's lots of really interesting things that are happening to turn those static images alive
Mhm.
and to make them either slightly animated or fully animated. One of the tools that you can combine is you can take Midjourney and you can take a tool called D-ID, and you can take a character from Midjourney and D-ID will make it talk, right? That is a two-step process that can become a one-step process. So for sure, there's going to be a natural evolution in terms of where static images will go into slightly moving images and then, much more significant animation, if you like. And already there's lots of really wicked things that you can do you combine Midjourney with Runway, and you may have seen them on your
Yeah.
LinkedIn or Reddit, where you've got essentially mini movies that have been created by people in an 8 or 12-hour session. Again, right, that stack is just going to be simplified,
Yeah.
and either it's going to be someone like a Midjourney or someone like a Stability that have got huge data sets that continue developing very quickly to build stuff like that. Or it's going to be a new company that
Mhm.
comes around and solves that new problem, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not a problem; it's just a really interesting opportunity. And there was an interesting piece by a VC called David Kay He's a VC at F4 Funds.
Yeah,
He's one of the general partners.
recently started fund with, yeah, very familiar.
Recent,
Very recent.
recently
I
started
think they
funds
launched a couple of months ago.
a couple of months ago, and he did a post, and he was very much against. He said something like NPCs.
I read that.
So having third party generative AI NPCs is not going to be a business model that anyone will buy into. I think it's a strong statement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, 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 I definitely, we're doing a lot of experimentation on TikTok, where if you are on TikTok and you are on TikTok Live, there are some incredible things that human NPCs are doing. It's an interesting development in the history of the human. Let's call it that way. But nevertheless, it is
Yeah.
developing. And I don't know the direction it's going to go in, but I think NPCs is a really, I'm not saying that David is wrong. I'm just saying that there's so much that we don't know yet about
No.
how it's going to go.
You are saying that David is wrong. Let's be honest.
No,
You're saying you have an
abs-
opposing, you're not saying he's wrong. You say, I have a different perspective on this. And time
I
will
have a
tell who
different.
is wrong.
I'm not he is an expert in text.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm not an expert in text. So from that perspective, we should take his perspective. My point is merely that your 5-year question, I think, is really hard
Yeah.
because there's going to be so much that happens in the next 6 to 12 to 24 months that will change all of these opportunities, and things that we've never thought about will be obviously done. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about building Half Moon Studio. It's also one of the reasons why I'm not being deterministic about it,
Yeah.
right? We are starting with picture quiz. We're starting with meshing all of these various solutions together to create fantastic output. I'm not starting with, this is the thing I'm going to be building in 3 years' time, because quite frankly, it probably will be obsolete by then, or someone else will have done it better. So the deterministic approach is something that I'm a huge fan of, testing and learning to see where it goes.
Yeah. I would say my perspective on this is the AI will give such an advantage to smaller studios and smaller teams that it will be unfair when competing against the big ones. And what I mean by that is you're able to produce games that are maybe don't reach the same scale, but reach scale at such a smaller cost compared to the big players, and maintain that scale at such a small cost compared to big players, that it will be unsustainable for the big players to continue operating in the way they have been continuing. We've seen this in multiple businesses where the cheap model has kind of undermined the big established ways of working. And like my favorite, not favorite, this is a bad thing to say, but even if we think about, let's say, armies, or like best armies, think Afghanistan stands undefeated against all the superpowers of the world, whether it's the Great Britain or Soviet Union or United States of America. They've beaten everybody,
Yeah.
and they've never had the the strongest army, but they had the cheapest army. And
And they have mountains.
yeah,
Huge
exactly,
help.
exactly. They play to their advantage. And the same thing when it comes to streaming wars. Like there's YouTube. Nobody can say that YouTube has the best content, like pound for pound best content, but it just has endless amount of content that is produced by the people at their own cost, at their own money. And YouTube just publishes. And when it competes against the Netflixes and the Disneys of the world, it kind of, just wins them in terms of engagement, just because the content is more cheaply produced, and in a way it shapes according to the needs. There's no central thinking behind it. It's very organic. And I feel like this is what we're going to see with an AI. It's just ability to produce good enough content at much cheaper and much faster pace. And that doesn't mean that the super games of the Starfields and the Uncharteds and the God of Wars, like those will continue being what they are. They are staples. But when it comes to the tier twos, the new franchises, maybe without the biggest publishers, as those games who have the $100 million budgets are competing against the ones that are coming in with the 5 and 10 and using a lot of AI, it's a battle that they can't win. And so that's how I'm
Pick.
kind of seeing. And you can be you can look at it from the perspective that this is very sad, or you can look from a perspective that this is very empowering because you can be in one of those smaller studios that makes a game or a product with much less of a capital at a much faster pace with the tools of an AI and seize the moment rather to be seized by the moment.
Could not agree more.
Wow, I'm kind of selling AI. I mean, again, I'm not. I literally just use Chat GPT just a little bit and have help from it, but I don't have these sort of a strong stance except when it comes to Web3. Uh, but I feel like there's a lot of positives, but there will be a lot of negatives, and I'm very empathetic on the people side. That's why I want to keep raising the point. It's like a lot of these things is like, how do you approach it? If you approach it in a very negative, deterministic, angry way, I think it's going to hurt you.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Damn. Well, Peter, we've agreed on many things. Tell the world what's going next for Half Moon Studios. You're in the midst of fundraise, right?
Yeah, we've started early
You got it.
conversations at this point. Yeah, everything that I've seen, our ambition is just growing, right? So, what was a budget from friends and family,
Yeah.
it's clear that I need to make 3 or 4 more hires for us to really be able to capitalize on all of the opportunities. Um, the second thing is the content. So we've built this content generation machine.
Mhm.
We keep adding more picture quizzes,
Yeah.
and that content is going to be distributed very widely. We're using uh, automation
Mhm.
as much as possible to create as much content and posting it on YouTube and posting it on TikTok. And we're doing all sorts of very interesting experiments from a marketing perspective on TikTok Live to see how we might be able to leverage this content in a way that it can either monetize there or drive traffic to other more higher value platforms like iOS and so we're continuing to build the content. We're, building new alpha
Mhm.
products and experimenting with that. But the thing that we're now progressing with is a new picture quiz game that leverages the existing content with a very different mechanic. And um, you may have done your research
Yeah.
into the picture quiz genre. It's not, the quiz genre is not a high value genre. It's not. It's just not, right? The monetization is primarily adds a little bit of in-app purchases. And so for us next, multiplayer has to be it, right? That's one of the key
Yeah.
things that we need to develop as a capability as an organization. And we haven't started that. And that's why one of the reasons why I'm definitely considering a much larger raise at this time.
Sounds super exciting. So for anybody
Thank you.
who's not into, for anybody who wants to be at the forefront of AI and content development and who wants to go to the moon, not just half the way to the moon with Peter and his team, reach out. LinkedIn, probably the best way to catch you. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the organization grows and how you will continue pioneering AI in content development. And I think it's very interesting that you are the founder because you have such a balanced, structured, and mature way of approaching startups, much more mature than what I never ever did. And that's why I'm very, very interested in seeing this journey continuing. And we'll follow up in a year. We'll see how far you've gotten with an AI and how big the company is at that point and what kind of all kind of cool products you're making. So thank you, Peter, for joining the podcast.
Let's do that. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you everybody for listening. And back with Peter if you're into AI. So bye bye, everybody.